Okay.
There you go. Yeah. So where would you like to start with this couple?
Okay. So I've seen this couple twice, I believe now, like 2 or 3 times. And the first couple of sessions were okay. Like I feel like we were like starting to get somewhere, and their main, like, I think goal here is to figure out how to best communicate with each other. But what's happening is, like, every time they see me, there's some sort of like argument or fight during the times that we're not together that they want to chat about. And then the 50 minutes also goes by so fast. So we've actually extended the session for Monday. And I guess what I kind of wanted to talk about was my last session that I had with them. So we had some stuff that wasn't like resolved, I guess, from the session before. So we kind of wanted to chat about that. It was about like some situation that happened with one of their birthdays and how the other one did not feel supported. And
Yeah. Is that what you brought up in the group
yeah,
supervision?
that
So
one.
before we get to that, so just a few things you've already mentioned around. So the first is around wanting to talk about a particular fight. So that's very common, right? In couples work, because what those fights are, they're small little manifestations of what the underlying issue is. They just, it's like, think of it as like a sneeze. You're sick and you sneeze. The sneeze is a manifestation of the cold, right? And so in this it's the exact same thing. It's the safest thing, and it's the most recent thing that people want to address. And it's like so front and center, and people think, the most recent thing is the issue. So they bring it up because they're, we only see what's in front of us, and we also, have to work within our blind spot. And none of us see whatever our blind spots are. So we go, this is what the issue is, right? They just see it from their lens, and it's part of the problem, and it's also part of the solution, because as the objective party, you can start digging underneath that and get to that root of whatever the issue is, right?
Yeah.
And then regarding 50 minutes going by really fast, that's exactly why 90% of the couples I see are for 90-minute sessions, right? And it's an easy thing to not use the word sell, but it's an easy thing to sell, because when someone tries a 50-minute session and they see how fast the pace goes, or how you feel like you're just starting to really work on something towards the end of a 50-minute session, they're like, oh yeah, of course it makes sense to do longer sessions. And I've even done 2.5 hour sessions for some couples that just take time to create a lot of resistance to going under. But without going under, we can't really get to the heart. And if we don't get to the heart, we're going to be circling the drain, meaning we're going to be talking about a different thing every time and not really getting to the underlying pattern that's really there, that needs to be like expressed out on the surface before we can really resolve anything.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree with that. And that's why we're doing the 90 minutes on Monday. But I guess my biggest concern was the last session. So we had like created ground rules and stuff that both of them agreed to, like in session, like, what does respect look like? What do they need from each other? And so we created rules around, like, obviously not interrupting each other. And for the most part, they're good at like following that and supporting each other. But last session, the male was finally like, it was like his turn to talk, and he was like sharing, and then the female like started like hysterically like nodding her head like this, like basically like saying like, no, like that's all wrong and stuff. And so I guess that's kind of where I felt a little stuck. Like I didn't know what the right thing to do was in that situation. So I continued to like have eye contact with him and like let him know that I'm listening, even though she was like beside him. But he got really, really frustrated that she was doing that, like, which fair. And so he got really upset, and he like got up and he was like, like, this is ridiculous. Like, clearly, like, it's my turn to talk, and like she's not letting me, and she's doing all of these things and stuff, right? And so he was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm out. Got up and left. And she was like super like high energy, like needed to say everything. And so I had let them know that, because we had ground rules from before that only kind of covered like not interrupting and respect, like maybe we should create ground rules around body language as well and what they need. And he was like open to that, but in that session he actually like was like, I don't want, like they texted me after saying like, yeah, like we want to try again, but in this session he was like, no, like I'm done with counseling, like I'm done with therapy, like this doesn't go anywhere. And he's had like poor experiences in the past too with couples therapy, I guess. So yeah, I honestly don't even know where to start. Like, I feel like they are all over the place. I asked them what their goals were. They were saying communication, but they're really fixated on like specific arguments that happen. And I remember last time in the group supervision, we were talking about how, he doesn't feel safe. And there's a part of their relationship that he doesn't feel safe in, where he can't be authentically like himself to share like his concerns. And so my question was, do I still continue without him? Because she wanted to, so I kind of stopped it and I said, like, it's not fair that we talk about him if he's not here and present in the situation. But she kind of wanted to say her piece, but it was really close to the end of the session, probably like 5 minutes. So I let her kind of finish and I asked her what her plan was for the evening to keep herself safe and stuff. And then to just keep me updated with if they would like to try again. And she texted me saying they would. But I think I need to also put boundaries in with her, because she'll like text me photos of like their conversations. And like last time I just said, oh, she texted me saying like, oh, like our relationship is gonna be like a complete mess by the time we see you next. And so I just texted back saying like, hey, like, I'm sorry you guys are going through this. Maybe some space would be good and we can chat the next time it's our session. And I kept it really brief. So one, I want to like create some boundaries the next time I see her about like texting and like sending these like conversations and stuff. And then two, I remember last time you said like it's really difficult to like navigate couples therapy without a modality. So I kind of wanted to like touch on that, and like you said that you like there's some like overview things that we can talk about on how to navigate them.
Okay, so you brought up a bunch of stuff. So first, around ground rules. So EFT has a whole reason why we don't do ground rules. And it's not to say that we don't for safety reasons. Like there's what's called contraindicators for success in therapy, but those are much bigger. Those are like active physical abuse, like a severe mental health issues where the counselor doesn't feel comfortable to work with maybe bipolar, schizophrenia, or something like that. But as far as like these kinds of behaviors, so think of everything. It's not that there's a right answer and a wrong answer, but think of everything as a trade-off, right? If you create ground rules and you're enforcing any boundaries around ground rules, what's the downside of that? Like, what is the trade-off? One, it may not work. Like in this case, as soon as something gets heated and as soon as one person gets triggered, right? What do you do then when someone's violating a ground rule, right? Now you're going to end up spending time in sessions patrolling whether someone's following rules or not, instead of doing therapy, right? And then what you got here is further delineating the definition of certain behaviors, and then who gets to decide, right? She's doing this behavior, and now you're deciding her behavior, her nonverbals are the ones that are not okay. So there's a risk of jeopardizing or rupturing an attachment with one of them, because now she's going to say to herself, okay, well, then I'll think of things that I don't like that he does. Let's add all these different things. And now we're like, what everything under the sun is going to go under these ground rules, right? And so then you're enforcing it, right? So that's the trade-off of ground rules, right? I think I see the intention for it, and it'll work for, I think, group psychotherapy, I think, is a good place to do ground rules, that everyone, as long as they're simple and somewhat flexible. But yeah, at EFT, it does sort of go against what it is that we want, which is to be able to go and reach the primary level of someone's experience. And sometimes we have to navigate through some ugly stuff and some indirect and what we call secondary responses, which includes all these nonverbals. And if we create ground rules, we're actually limiting the way someone expresses themselves. It's somewhat important sometimes to see it, to know what it actually looks like at home. Because if you're creating an artificial space in your sessions that isn't parallel at all, or is not reflective of what home life looks like, then you're creating a different level of engagement in the session. Then they go home and they go back to their default. What you actually want to do, and what we do in EFT, is our job is to get them triggered. We want to see them in their natural habitat, so to speak. And then we want to go underneath and allow them to access the parts of themselves that they turn off when they're heated in their natural habitat, right? So there's a reason why people learn to share in the way that they do. And that's, reinforced in their life over time based on their early environment and relationships. And it informs how they see the world. So if we limit that, then it's just like an artificial space that we're creating for them, where we go, okay, this is how you behave here. It's like a child, in school you behave like this, at home you wear this mask, outside you wear this mask. And so they can behave, but then no real, once you take them out of that environment, it's not going to stick.
Okay.
And that's the reason why, and not to poo-poo like other modalities, but that's, to actually just bring up clients' feedback about certain modalities, is that, okay, yeah, we do the thing and we're able to do really well in session, but it doesn't translate outside of the session. And in my experience, the reason for that is because they're not really triggered in the session. If you're not really triggered, you're on your best behavior and you're not really being yourself. And you're not shifting the internal dynamic that creates all this stuff. That's what needs to shift. That real healing that touches on their early attachment wounds is what needs to heal. Once that's healed, then naturally people act differently, because now they don't feel like they have to cope in these ways that they used to have to cope with.
Okay. So if we're not doing the ground rules, because I think last session, like, that's what they wanted. Like, they wanted like rules around that. Like, how would I, now that I'm seeing them on Monday, like, we're not doing that anymore?
Does every client that comes and sees you, when they state, I want CBT, or I want to talk about this, is that always what it is that they really want or need?
No, definitely
People
not.
We say what we think based on our worldview and our knowledge of the world, what needs to happen, right? Which is why when I meet with my clients individually, before I meet with them together, one of the questions I ask is, what do you think needs to change? I want to understand their worldview first before I impose some new modality, new blueprint into their mind. I want to know, are they flexible in, that idea of you can't teach old dogs new tricks. If someone's been doing something the same way forever, it's fine if they're willing to also put that down for a moment and try something new. But if they're not, it becomes quite difficult, right? So sometimes in that first session, one of the partners will say, look, I'm not the issue here. My partner's the issue. They have to change ABC. And that's the only way this will work. And because I have them one-on-one in that moment, I can give them a more accurate representation of what EFT is, and let them know, look, like if that's the only way you think this will work, I'm sorry, but I'm not able to help you, right? So they're really given no choice other than to at least try. Because at the end of the day, if what they've been doing, hasn't been working, why are we just following the same guidelines, right? So I can ask them, like, so, how has that been working for you, trying to change your partner all this time? And the answer is, of course, it hasn't been working. That's why you're here.
Yeah.
Right? So, I tell them I'm here to provide a process that I'm very confident that if you engage with it, that you'll get good results, right? But that will require often doing things that are very uncomfortable. That means doing things that they're not used to doing. And but once they do it and they see it works, they realize it's a lot less work than what they've been doing so far. It's just foreign, but really on some level, what's interesting about EFT is that as foreign as it is for a lot of people, once they do it and it works, it's like an old language that they used to speak and they just forgot about using, because I think we're all born with being able to share through a primary lens, through, babies cry when they need something, and they always are very vulnerable in the way that they're expressing themselves, right? They can't not be, right? They poop themselves and, it is what it is, right? Like they can't not be that. They're born vulnerable by default. And that's taught, that's programmed out of them, right? And that's where we get, insecure attachment types due to early environments that then once we allow them to share in a secure way and they see it works, they're able to go back to that security over time.
Okay.
So I'm not worried when a partner or a couple says to me, this is what we want, and I can reflect it back to them in a way that fits with EFT language, and then oftentimes it's still what they want, right? It just might look different. Ultimately, the answer comes down to, yeah, this is what you want, but you're unsure of how to get there. Is that correct? Yes. So I have a model that I think can help.
Okay. Sounds good.
The goals are always valid, right? The goals are, communication issues, deeper connection, and any permutation of that.
Yeah, I think I'm just like struggling with like when I do see them on Monday, because like there was so much tension last time. Like I feel like I need to just start.
So let me ask you this: why is tension bad?
I feel like I don't think it's bad necessarily. I just feel like I don't know how to navigate their tension, because
exactly
they're like,
that's it. I don't know how. See, it comes back to the same thing. It's not bad, but I don't know what to do in that moment. Once you know what to do and how to do it, and you're comfortable in that space, you modulate it very fast, right? It's why the opposite of hate is not like love, right? The opposite is indifference. The opposite of both love and hate is indifference, right? So we want emotion. Emotion is good. Like any emotion. It's much harder to work with a couple that hasn't talked for 2 years and they're not wanting to engage in therapy, and they're just kind of there because, I don't know, it's like some last ditch effort, or because now one of them's cheating and is in love with someone else and they're there trying to assist their partner to grieve the relationship. That's much harder.
Yeah. No, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I don't really know. Like, I think it's more of like a me thing on how to navigate the session, not a them thing, but also it's like I struggle with allowing the male to like have his time to speak, because the female like overrides the whole session.
I'll argue this. It's not that she overrides it. It's that
Yeah.
her nervous system doesn't know what to do with the information that comes up.
Yeah, that's 100% right. Like for her, like her personality or like what she needs is to get it all out. And like that's just how she feels better if she says everything. And then
that's her. I would say that's not her. That's her coping.
Yeah, her coping mechanism for sure.
Right. And we're not here in EFT to reinforce the coping. What we're here in EFT to do is to help them find a new way, a primary way to get the real need met, not the substitute need. So think of coping as substitute needs. Okay. It's how she learned to get so let's say her need is connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Her real need is connection. And the substitute way she got that need met in her life is to pursue and to just diarrhea all over the place, needs and wants and criticisms. And when she gets someone to respond and listen, it's an indirect way of getting that need met, because I'm going to be super aggressive and I'm going to get you to listen to what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But they're not really listening. They're listening out of fear.
That's
right?
exactly them.
Right. That's all pursuers and withdrawers though. Right. So almost all pursuers, this is how they learn to cope in the world.
Mm-hmm.
They grew up in an environment where their needs were not met consistently, where of course no one's gonna get their needs always met, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like no baby, every time they cry, they're gonna, right? But if it's super inconsistent, if each time they have to cry really, really, really loud before they get their needs met, before their mom or dad responds to them, then what they do is they have to learn, I have to cry quicker and louder. And so that window of just kind of ramping up gets smaller and smaller. And so that's an example of, and of course, as they get older, they learn, look, people don't love me for who I am because I can say, hey, mom, I want to talk to you, and mom's busy.
Yeah.
But if I, scrape my knee or something like that, maybe then she'll listen to me. And so the things, so that's sort of where that, you can call it like a dramatic sort of mask comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And so they get really aggressive and they get really like pursuing in that sense. And so that translates then into their adult relationships, right? And maybe into their lives. And in some cases, it's a good coping. This like very assertive sort of style is healthy, but in relationships, it's generally not very healthy because it reinforces that worldview that I'm not lovable. I have to be really critical. I have to use a sharp tone. I have to be this like angry, critical person. I can't be vulnerable. I can't be soft. Because they learn being soft is not going to get them what they need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because she has mentioned that, like, she's like, I'm not yelling at him. I'm just yelling because he's not listening. And then for him, he's like, I can't engage because I don't want it to like blow out of proportion. So I just be quiet and mute until like things pass.
Right. They're both reinforcing their own worldviews.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think
so
like we've touched on that piece on how it's clearly not serving them. But I guess like, yeah, I feel like I'm just stuck on like how to start this new session now, considering like he got up and left, said he didn't want to do it at all, but like clearly is wanting to because they booked another session. So there's that's great. Like that's positive that there's definitely some effort on both sides to like make it work or at least try. But like, am I supposed to just be like, okay, so like, what do we want to work on? Or like, what are the goals for the session? Like, I feel like I just need some clarity around that.
I think your focus, you already know what they want to work on, right? You know that they're wanting to de-escalate. You know that they're wanting to learn to communicate. You know that she's a pursuer. You know he's a withdrawer. You've got all the things you need in order to work with them. I wouldn't worry so much about questions. I would worry about letting them have an experience that's different than what they're used to.
Okay.
Right. Okay. And bringing that experience out of them. And that's what EFT, aims to do each session, multiple times per session. So her being the pursuer. So, I mean, considering he left last session, one of the things I might do is start with her, and she needs to find a way, or you need to help her find a way to share something in a way that's soft and vulnerable with him, without that harshness, without that anger. Okay. Right. And the way to do that is to start with, like, there's a million ways to do it, but it's to start with validating why she does what she does. Okay. Right. You have to validate the intention behind what she does in relation to her attachment need. Okay. So if her attachment need and you want to do it deductively. You don't want to impose ideas onto her. It needs to come out organically. So, you can start, since they like to do that. Talk to me about, an interaction that happened this week. Yeah, you sent me all these texts. Okay, so tell me what was actually going on in that moment.
So
Right?
those texts are actually like from like the original situation, the birthday situation. And that's because we're just like reliving that because their perceptions on the situation were just so different on like how it went down and what each person needed. So I guess she was sending me those to be like, oh, look, like I did try, like I did ask him a million times if he wanted me to come over, but he kept saying no. And then, but I didn't even like go through the
Yeah.
text.
Well,
But like,
you'll find that every single interaction where there's an escalation, it's always due to one person perceiving something differently than how the other person was intending their behavior to be. So it's
yeah.
always misinterpretation of one kind or another, right? That's what we're working with, right? We have to understand, so once you get them to a primary place, it's much easier to be able to say, oh, now do you understand what the other person's behavior actually meant, versus trying to explain it to them when they're not connected to their primary experience. Right?
Okay.
So I'll give you an example.
Yeah. Okay.
So tell me about a particular fight that happened this week. That's a really good, easy way to start, right? Unless they're escalated right there in the room with you, because that makes it a lot easier. You can just go, oh, thank you. I don't need the story now. I don't need the story of the week, because you're triggered right here, right now. I'm gonna jot down some things that you just did, like to yourself. You can write that, meaning, like, give me an example of that nonverbal that led to him leaving last time. So what was it that she was doing?
She was literally, so he was like explaining his point of view, and she was sitting next to him, like just like very aggressively shaking her head, like in a no
Perfect.
like position.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I would right there, I would move away from him and go, oh wow, something's happening for you right now, right? You're shaking your head in response to him sharing this thing that he's sharing, right? Can you tell me what are you perceiving right now? How do you interpret what he's talking about?
But
Right?
okay, so I guess like okay, so that was kind of what I was struggling with, like, do I stop and do that? But then I felt like he felt like he wasn't ever getting his turn because he was starting to talk and then she was doing that. And so if I took that away from him, like I felt like I was losing that like relationship as well, because then
What was the alternative? What ended up happening?
so he said what he said what, well, yeah, I guess he left eventually.
Right.
Yeah, so he
So
like
so the reason I say that is, you're right. It is a balancing act as far as who gets the floor. At the same time, the reason it's called emotionally focused therapy is we follow emotion, right? So whose emotion is more activated in the room, right? At the moment, right? Now, I don't mean to say that you always follow the person that is the most activated, right? But if someone's activated, they're not going to be able to hear what's going on for their partner anyways.
That's true, because they're not regulated. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, that makes
And
sense.
so what you really want the way you see it is, it's not about who has the floor, right? What it comes down to is who has more access to their underlying experience right now, right? If he's calm and he's sharing something, he's probably not super connected to what's going on for him, right? Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But if she's triggered, most likely he's sharing something that either the content is very triggering or the way he's sharing is very triggering for her, right? So it's a disservice to her primary experience to ignore it, right? It's a dance, right? So if you ended up going to her and you got her really deep, right? There's a lot of different analogies. You can think of it as like an elevator. So you keep going down the elevator with her of her primary emotions, and there's a lot of depth to it. Or you can think of it like an ocean. So, if you're in the sky, you're just like really disconnected from your emotions. If you're like right above the ocean and you're treading water, that might be where you're like connected to more of the coping, the anger, the pursuing. So it's like you're talking about emotions, but you're not actually in them. And then like right just underneath the water, you're maybe owning, yeah, this makes me angry, right? This is, I'm getting frustrated, right? And then as you go deeper and deeper underneath the water in this unknown territory, you're getting into like really them inhabiting their feelings, their actual primary feelings. So even if they said the word frustrated, right? Now you're getting to the point where it's like, yeah, when so here's what my frustration's about. Let's say I'm talking from her point of view. So he's talking about the story, and here I am thinking that he doesn't care about me. And when I think he doesn't care about me, that really hurts. So now you're starting to get underneath it. And when I'm feeling all this hurt, my mind goes to, this relationship's never going to work. He's going to leave me. And then all the sadness comes up. So as she's inhabiting that sadness, now you're getting even deeper in the water. And then you go, maybe you go, when was the last time you felt this kind of sadness? Oh yeah, when my dad left when I was 5. And then I ended up thinking to myself, like, I'm never going to be with anyone again, right? And now we're getting at these different layers.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
And so that's just the analogy of like levels of feelings. And as you get closer and closer to attachment and like attachment messages that that relate to early childhood experiences, then you understand, oh, now I know where the sensitivity of him talking in this way is actually coming from.
Yeah.
Right. The sensitivity has nothing to do with like what's happening in the moment. It's all about the past.
Yeah. That's really interesting, because I feel like I can see all of that with her, like, but I think surface level, like what she provides is like, okay, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I feel like I need to get her to dig in deeper into the emotion and not just the surface level. Well, that's actually not what happened, because that's what
that's literally stage 1, step 2 of EFT, right? It's like you're literally right at the beginning.
They're spending all their time like just going back and forth about the situation and how it played out.
And that's exactly why you need a model. So once you have a model and you're like, okay, this is where they're at. They're talking cognitively about their experience, but they're not engaging in their experience, right? That's exactly a cue to go right into step 2, right?
Okay.
Right. And so the idea of step 2 is in getting them to engage with their experience, right? So, give me an example of what you just described where she's talking about it, but not giving you, what did you call it? Giving you what is going on for her.
So in that situation, when he was describing like what was going on or his perception of it, she was getting really upset because she felt like she needed to defend that's not what happened. Sorry?
Not the because. So if you use that as the because, you're buying into their story. The because is not the content. The because is never the content, right? What you're wanting to do, think of it as like a car, right? You're wanting to go underneath the hood and you're wanting to understand like the experience of everything that's not seen. The because doesn't matter, right? The because is the idea that she's giving herself in any particular moment, right? What you want is, so like using that as an example, so he's telling the story, right? And I can say, on the one hand, it's the way in that moment that he told the story. It's the content. It's what's going on in that moment for her and what she's telling herself. It's like, who's to say what's the real cause, right?
Yeah.
But it's not important, right? What's important is when I ask her right now, right here, right now, right? I see her upset, right? That I know is a fact, right? What are you telling yourself right now in terms of what is it that he's saying to you, right? So let's say he's talking about some story in the past and he said, you said blah, 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 whatever it is. And then she goes, no, I didn't, right? So So I go, okay, perfect. Let's pause right there. Let's zoom into that moment. So when he just said, you said blah, 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 what did you hear from that? Right now, right here, right now, what did you hear? And so maybe now she has to look internally and go, okay, so I interpreted his statement to mean that he doesn't care about me, let's say, or that I'm not that important to him, right? Or that I'm an idiot, right? Something like that. Okay, so you took that to mean that he thinks you're an idiot. Yeah, okay. Now, when you think that your partner thinks that about you, right? Even though that's not, and I might go to him, I say, even though it's not what you said, right? But this is what you're interpreting, right? What do you think to yourself? Like right here, right now, your partner says you're an idiot.
Yeah.
What do you tell yourself about that? Oh, I tell myself that, he doesn't love me. Okay. So let's say that's it. Okay, wow, that's pretty powerful. So right now, when you think to yourself he doesn't love you, what's coming up for you when you think that? And see, I'm already slowing my tone. I'm kind of facilitating her being able to connect to her body a little bit. So what's that like? It's really painful, right? And then you'll see her squirming and all this different kind of resistance and wanting to make it about him or whatever it is. Go, okay, right? So I'm asking you about your body and what's going on. When you think that to yourself and you're talking to me about something else, let's bring it back, right? So what is it like right now in your body to think that he doesn't love you? It's really painful, right? Okay, how do you know it's painful? Where is it in your body? Tell me, where do you place that pain? Okay, I place it in my heart. Already you're bringing it down to that level that she may not be comfortable with, but it's new, right? And as soon as you do that, as soon as she can connect to that, he's going to also drop down, or in his case, come up. Like he'll come online and we call it being shored up. Like he'll feel more connected to her because he's seeing a different side of her that she doesn't normally show. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So that's where the magic happens, right? Is that's where you need to get them. Is underneath all the perceptions.
Yeah. That was really helpful. That was phenomenal the way you did it. I felt like I was a client. Yeah, I think you're right. Like it doesn't matter about the situation or the birthday or all of that stuff. It matters about like the actual feelings that are attached to it, like causing those responses. But
that's right.
Yeah, I feel like
I wouldn't tell the client that it doesn't matter. What I would say, if you're going to bring it up, is going to say, so all of that you're talking about, right? Let's bring it into how that impacts you, right? That's why we're here. Part of what we're doing here is we want to understand, how do we impact each other? The fact that you're here and you keep coming back despite how hard this relationship is, despite having, walking out of the session, it tells me that you guys are really attached to each other. You're really important to each other, right? There's a lot of love there, right? So that's what we're here to find out. How is it that there's so much love and you guys can't get on the same page? Right. And what we're going to do here today is we're going to help each other understand what all this stuff, all this behavior that the other person is doing, how it's landing on you in such a way that's coming back to your partner in a painful way. Right. And it's creating all this escalation. Right. We need to talk in a different channel. Right. And so that's why we don't need ground rules, because when we talk in that different channel, that's so reinforcing. Right? That we don't have to like try to avoid doing the wrong thing. We just want to reinforce doing the right thing.
Okay.
Right. And so that's just the beginning though. That's just the step 2, right? Then step 3 is actually getting them to turn to their partner and actually share that. Like looking at their partner in the eyes and saying, when I think that 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 you don't care about me, right? When I think that to myself, and it's really painful and it really hurts, right? There's a lot of different directions. So let's say that's where you got, and you then ask her, now, what would that be like? So it's emotionally focused therapy. That means every time you hit a new primary emotion, that's the time where you've hit like a new layer, a new level. And that's where you go, okay, what would that be like now to turn to your partner and to share that with them? This is what we call right brain to right brain connection. The name for it is called an enactment. You're enacting those primary feelings in a safe kind of environment to do so. And so if she goes, the reason you ask what would it be like is not for her to turn and do it. The reason is you're trying to gauge how scary is that for her to do. What does she anticipate that it will look like when she does it? If she anticipates that it'll go really badly, that means she's not safe to do it. And it means that her past experience, whether it was this relationship or going back to childhood, of sharing something vulnerable like this didn't go very well, right? So you can ask her, okay, so this is going to be really hard for you, right? Between 1 and 10, how hard? Oh, if it's a 10, okay, let's not share. That's too much, right? But I'm curious, what is it that you're afraid of? What are you afraid that's going to happen, right? And you want to crystallize it. So you don't want to just an answer where, oh, just that it won't work well. Okay.
Yeah.
But tell me.
Why do you think that? Yeah.
Yeah. Not the why, but tell me, what does not working well look like? What do you anticipate will happen? What's the fear that, like, give me what exactly you think will happen, right? Because what that does now is now she's in her fear. She's thinking about what she's scared of that will happen. So let's say she thinks, oh, if I was to share this pain, I think it will just scare him off. He'll turn away. He'll walk away like he did last session, right? And you go, oh, yeah, and that'll be really, really even more painful, yeah? She goes, yeah, okay. Now I can see why you don't share this, right? Because you're afraid of this happening, right? So you go, now what would it be like instead to share this fear? Not the pain, but just this fear of sharing. And then she goes, oh yeah, that's scary, but you know, I could probably do that. And it's still sharing an experience because you had her connected to a certain level of pain. And then you had her look at him and go, no, I can't do it. I'm afraid he's going to turn away. And then now she's inhabiting the fear. That's the feeling she has right now in that moment. And so you ask her, so what would it be like to share that? And then you get her to do that. So of course, if that's also a 10, then we do what's called thin slicing. We make the experience or the enactment even smaller.
Okay.
Right. And we can always thin slice it. You think, oh, there's no way to thin slice it even more. There's always a way to thin slice it. Right. But if it's not too scary, you go, can you turn to him? Can you let him know that you're afraid of sharing your vulnerable experience because you're worried that he's going to turn away and walk out the room? Can you do that? And she goes, yeah, okay. She does it. And then you ask her what, and then, so now you process what just happened. Right. And so what was that like? It was hard, but you know, now look at him, you know, is he here? Is he walking away? Like, what do you see in his eyes? And, you know, hopefully he's there. And then she goes, yeah, it feels really good to see that he's here. What's that like? Even he hasn't responded yet, but what's it like? Oh, it feels really good, right? It feels really relieving, right? Fear goes down a little bit. And then you check in with him. What was that like for you? Right? And then, wow, like I've never seen this part of her, or wow, I don't want her to be afraid. I want her to be able to come to me with this kind of stuff. Wow, can you share that? Can you share that with her? And then he shares it with her. Just yeah, I want you to be able to share this with me. And then you go back to her and you go, what was that like? So first you shared with him, I checked in with you, you felt it was good, but then he didn't respond yet. Now he's responded. It went really well. Now, what's that like? Oh, it feels even better. Fear goes down. Okay, what would it be like now to reconnect with that pain and share that with him? You can go, and again, you can go back and now that the fear is lower, you can go back to that if you have time. But that's the idea, is what completes the loop is doing the enactment and then processing the enactment. Then you can do what we call like tying a ribbon around it and connect it to psychoed and go, so look at what you guys did today. Like, you were able to share this thing that was super hard to do, that you normally are not able to do. This is how you normally share, but instead you were able to go under it. He was able to hear you and give you an amazing response, which even, you know, soothed you even more. And like, now, like, think about, you know, all you did was share what was underneath what's already going on for you, but that was like not comfortable to share. And look at how different his response was, right? So you're just kind of integrating what happened and giving it some language. And like, wow, can you imagine if you guys could do this at home next time, you know, you got triggered in this way, you know, instead of running to him and telling him, you know, you did this, and you need to do this, instead saying, yeah, I'm really scared to share with you what's going on for me. Okay? So that's the idea.
Nice.
So it's built in homework in a way.
Yeah. I wrote a bunch of stuff down.
And I'll share this with you, so you can always obviously go back and watch it.
Yes, that will be really helpful. Okay, and then so we did step 2, which was like getting under the emotion and actually like naming it, and then like working through the emotion. And then step 3 is when they actually
enact it
and like turn to each other and share, and then go back and forth, like, oh, you know, she's saying this, how does that feel for you, and have that. And then so what would be is there only 3 steps?
No, there's step 4 is part of it is that psychoed at the end when you put the ribbon on it, and part of it too. Well, the actual step is called reframing. Okay. The reason it's called reframing is what the goal of step 4 is, in a way, is to change the initial perception that they had going in of that particular behavior or statement, and understand it now from a different lens, from the lens of now, so let's say his intention, it's essentially getting on the same page around what the original intention was. So what causes the whole eruption is the misperception of the intention, right? And so what we're doing now is getting on the same page around what the intention actually was. Okay. Right? Because once you're connected at the heart, and ideally in an EFT session, we don't just do step 2 and 3 with one person. We do it with both. So now we want to go to his side of what that experience was like and get him to do an enactment around what was going on for him, right?
Okay, so with the same situation? Usually, yeah. Okay.
If we have time, yeah. So in a 90-minute session or an 80-minute session, there's usually enough time, once you're experienced, is to, you know, it's called a figure 8, right? So the figure 8 is, you can look it up later, the EFT figure 8. So you, on the top of the figure 8, you've got one person's behavior, right? And then you go down and it crosses the middle where it's like, what's the other person interpreting? And then it goes through the other person. And then there's stuff that happens underneath the water. And then what comes back to you is the other person's behavior. So what people see is just the top. They only see the top of the figure 8.
Yeah, right? Not the actual feeling.
Yeah. Exactly. So what we're doing is when we now go on the other side for that same experience, we get to see what his experience was. And then at the end, when we have both, we go, oh, so this is what your actual intention was in what you were sharing. And this is what your actual intention was. So that's the idea of like tying the bow, because in an ideal situation, we're able to both share what was going on underneath it and integrate what actually was the intention behind the behavior. And the behavior, remember, oftentimes is just a coping. Yeah. So we get to learn what the purpose of the coping was, right? Okay. And over time, we're able to get deeper and deeper and deeper, and it becomes more and more believable because it just becomes so clear. The coping is not conscious, it's not voluntary, it's just habitual, and it's just the best tool or the best resource they have to get that need met, because they haven't yet learned how to share in that way, in the new way that you're kind of helping them share with. And essentially what we're doing is we're trying to create a new figure eight. You've got your old pattern and we're trying to move to a new pattern, a pattern in which, you know, I model vulnerability and I get that back.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That actually was very helpful. So like, you know how we were talking about doing it with her and getting her, oh, like you feel like an idiot, da, 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 and then do that whole process with her. So when we're gonna kind of shift it towards him, would we just start from the same thing? Like, oh, what, you know, how did that situation make you feel?
That's the quickest way is,
Okay.
so I write down two behaviors, right? I write down what her trigger was from him, and then I write down what his trigger was from her. And remember, we're looking at one moment in time. Like it's literally an entry point is all you're looking for.
Okay.
It can get really, really complicated if you add time into it, right? So in a 5-minute fight, you have like 100 entry points, right? You have 100 things that were said and done, but you can go into one. You don't need to go and then go and then what happened and then what happened and then what happened.
Mm-hmm.
It can get really complicated, right? If you pick one entry point, meaning the thing that he just said, sometimes I'll even ask them if I don't have a lot of time. In that fight, what was the thing that activated you the most? And then I just asked them for it. What do you remember was the thing that was like them, you know, that affected you the most? And that's the starting point. So when he did this,
Yeah,
when he said
that's
this,
really helpful because now you're asking me these questions and I actually know the answers from what they've already shared.
Yeah. And the idea is, it's not what he did or said in that particular moment, that particular day.
Mm-hmm.
It's what you're really after is the underlying part. How does that land on you? Because tomorrow you're going to have a different fight. It's going to land on you the same way.
Yeah.
Tonight you're going to fight about cleaning. Tomorrow you're going to fight about parenting. And ultimately, the underlying message that you get about how you see yourself and how you see your partner seeing you is always going to be the same.
Yeah.
So what's neat about that is that you can, from one moment in time, you can extrapolate to the whole relationship.
Mm-hmm. What was that question you said? When you're like, oh, I just ask them if I don't have enough time.
Yeah, just what was the trigger?
Oh, what was the trigger?
And then I crystallize it. So you're saying, so let's say for him, when she was shaking her head, let's say that's the trigger, right? And if it's happening in the session, I don't need to ask them, right? I can just go, oh, I noticed something just happened. It to me, it looked like it was right after she was shaking her head. And then you looked down and you looked kind of off. Do you remember that? Yeah. So when she was shaking her head, what did you interpret there? What was she doing? What was she saying when she was shaking her head? Right? Not what she actually said, but there's like a, you know, comic strip thought bubble over her head. Like, what did you actually hear? So it's
it
the
could go
message
both
behind the
ways. Like it
message.
could be like I could reach out to her and talk about the shaking head, but I could also reach out to him and talk about the shaking head. So is it like up to me on kind of like who I want to start with?
Well, in that case, if you're talking about the shaking head, if you went to her, you're asking her about, this was how you respond, right? You respond with the shaking head as you're coping, right?
Yeah.
That's not your trigger, right? That's how you respond for him, that would be his trigger. The shaking head would be his trigger. Her trigger around the same thing is maybe when he was sharing something about, right before.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And you would get it isolated. So you go, so what was it? Was it what he said? Was it how he said it? Was it like a sharpness in his tone? Can you mimic that for me? Like, especially if you're talking about last week or something like that, can you give me an example of what it looked like? Right? And then you have a clear sensory piece to what it actually like looks like. Not just like, because you want to know, because there could be a lot of aspects to you know, to what triggers you.
Yeah.
Right?
So what would you do if like she's getting triggered and you're like asking and digging deep, and then like whatever she's seeing is triggering him and then he's responding to that?
So if you're facilitating well, you're moving towards primary. right? So generally, as someone's moving towards primary, it also calms the other person down,
Okay.
right? That being said, sometimes there's steps to get to primary. There's a lot of resistance, so to speak, right? And you have to follow it. You have to really, this is what makes couples counseling very different, is peripheral. And this is why I recommend in person as opposed to Zoom, because
Yeah.
when you're in the room, you have a sense, even if you're not looking at them, what's going on for them, like if they're activated, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I might put my hand and I go, I know this is hard for you to hear, just stay with me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trust me, we'll get there. Trust me, it'll be worth it. I might throw a joke in there. Like there's a lot of things depending on your relationship with them that will work. But
Yeah.
once they go through it once or twice, they already know kind of what the goal is, right?
Mm-hmm.
They know that what you're trying, if they stay with it, they'll be rewarded for it, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes it is activating. It's really yeah, like I've had people walk out of sessions too. And that's exactly why I said to follow her in this particular case, because if she's super activated, you have to, before you come back to, I'm not saying you go to her and you stay with her. You just go to her for a moment. If you go to her early enough as she's getting activated,
Mm-hmm.
you're preventatively allowing yourself to go back to him.
Mm-hmm.
You're soothing her so that you can go back to him.
Yeah.
It's not to reward her and to say, oh, now we're going to focus on you. No. You're just going, oh, I know this is hard for you to hear. Just stay with me. We're going to finish with him, and then trust me, it'll be worth it. And
okay,
then
so that's what I could have done there with her.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what? Go online and find some Sue videos of her touching people's knees. There's tons of them out there.
Okay.
That's her example of like soothing the other person while she's working with one person.
Mm-hmm.
That's an example of what she does.
Okay.
But sometimes she'll just be with them and just look at them for a moment and then just go right back. There's a lot of things you can do.
Okay. Thank you. I know we're up for the hour.
Yeah.
This was really helpful. I knew nothing about EFT, so I think it's nice to like have it broken down. And I wish I could do more research, which I will try to do. It's just so crazy busy with everything else going on. But these steps are really clear, and like I know that it probably takes time to get through each step, but at least like there is something to follow, which makes it easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a flowy kind of model. So you're not necessarily going step 1, 2, 3, 4. You're always going like step 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, and then 4, right? Like, and it's part of the model. And that's just stage 1. There's 3 stages. So that's what we covered today.
Okay. Okay. So that like so we covered step 2 and step 3 and step 4. So is step 1 just getting to know them?
It's called the assessment. Yeah, so it's getting to know them essentially.
Yeah, perfect. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I will see them on Monday, so I will give it my best shot.
Let me know how it goes, and I'll send you this video. And yeah, just feel free to look up some EFT examples online. That might be helpful.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No problem.
And I hope you feel better.
Thank you. All right. We'll see you later today.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Take care. Bye.